Kendall Kaut's a brilliant writer, covers men's basketball. Glad to have him as a part of Sic'Em365.com and as a guest on Sic'Em 365 Radio. And he has a story in the premium section. Kaut's thoughts, base rate neglect in Baylor in the 2022 NCAA tournament. I know, Kendall, you got a flight here in about a half an hour, but I mean, you went into depth about politics and like world history in comparing whatever these things you are about people who hit things on the nose or don't. Your thoughts about kind of how you came about that story?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Smokey. Always happy to join you all. I like to talk politics in a way that doesn't get too political. By that I mean, you know, there isn't really a monoculture in America anymore. We're in 1995. Everybody sat down, watched Seinfeld, even Major League Baseball, the NBA. Kind of the NFL might be the last refuge of that in America. But even the people who hate Donald Trump or hate Joe Biden at least recognize the elections occurred. So I think for me, the easiest thing is just like, okay, can I go back to like 2010 when, despite being very partisan, it was a little less partisan and the hats are a little different, to try and attach that feeling that we at least have some understanding. That's my hope. I was really glad when I read the comments, despite knowing, you know, this person's a MAGA diehard or this person, you know, was a block Trump up day one kind of guy. Nobody wanted to jump in and debate politics there. They wanted to debate Baylor basketball. I think that's the apex of why sports is great, that you have people that are MAGA diehards or people that are Biden's the greatest of all time, and they can just talk Baylor basketball, be friends, and get along for the day.
So taking a look at tomorrow in Fort Worth, it'll be Baylor and Norfolk State. Kendall, what have you gathered about Norfolk State at this point?
Craig, I haven't spent as much time on them. Obviously, they won a lot of games at the end of the season. Were able to win their league. I think the big thing is, if I'm looking at Baylor staff, they always focus on kind of, look, don't disrespect an opponent like this after the Texas Southern defeat in 2019. I think they'll play up that Mizzou loss to Norfolk State when it's a 2-15 game after Mizzou had been so dominant the second half of Big 12 play that season. They'll point out that their, you know, top scorer was the player of the year in their league. But realistically, Baylor has no business losing that game. Every joke you will hear if you're a Baylor fan for the next year you have to take, like Virginia did. Just no excuse for that loss. I don't care injuries. I don't care if Jeremy Sohan and Kendall Brown get lost on the way to the arena and can't find their way out of the bus. The guys you have to be able to beat Norfolk State tomorrow. Yeah,
I mean, that's why you're a number one seed, so you get to play close if you can, and also you get to play somebody that you should beat in the first round. And overall thoughts, Kendall, you know who they are. They know who they are. They did get beat by Oklahoma. Is that an outlier, or is that something that in the end, and I'm not one of those, well, it was probably good they get extra practice time. I've never been that way. But in the end, could that have worked out for them?
It could work out for them, Smokey. I do think that was an outlier game, right? Baylor could lose in the tournament to North Carolina or Marquette, UCLA, St. Mary's, Indiana, any of those teams from here on out, because even a top 5 team loses to a team that's ranked somewhere between 15 and 40 on a regular day of college basketball. But that OU game was so strange that OU normally doesn't hit threes like that. And Baylor, as bad as they've been from 3 without LJ, is not as bad as they were from 3 that day. So there were 2 very uniquely bad events. Teams lose games like that in the tournament. I brought up when KU lost to VCU in the Elite Eight a few years ago. VCU shot out of its mind. KU shot about the worst it had all season. Shaka Smart parlays that to the Texas job. Now at Marquette, maybe it all comes full circle. But I just don't think if Baylor loses North Carolina or Marquette, it's likely to be the way it lost to Oklahoma. That was just such an outlier game for the Bears.
So, Kendall, when it comes to Baylor and the way that they've been playing here as of late, how do you kind of view what's needed for a tournament run? I mean, obviously everybody's got to step up their game, you know, a pretty significant level to go to where they want to ultimately go. But what little tweaks or things do you see that if they do happen, Baylor's got a good chance to make a deep run?
I think, Craig, for me, it's one simple thing. Kendall Brown has got to take threes when he's open. If I'm Norfolk State, I'd literally say we're just going to look there Kendall Brown to shoot because he hasn't taken them. Kendall Brown is outlier athletic compared to anybody that they will have on the floor. And I think if you're a team in that round, I think if you're even Carolina or Marquette in the second round, you say, you know what, we're going to close out soft on Kendall, make him prove he can hit threes, kind of like KU did at Allen Fieldhouse. Everybody, I'm sure, watched that Our Time show where Kendall's nailing threes. He's made him at a pretty decent clip this year and taken them. But he's been reluctant to do so, and I think that'll be the challenge for Baylor this week to tell Kendall, look, you got to take these shots, man.
You know who they will have if they are fortunate to keep advancing. It is the battering ram of blue bloods, but Baylor is the defending national champion. Does that matter that it could be North Carolina or it could be others along the way? If they get to that point, that's good news. They keep winning.
I think it's good news that they keep winning, Smokey, but I also think it's nice just to play those teams and say, look, Baylor wants to eventually get to a place where they're thought of like Duke was thought of in the 90s, where, Duke wasn't necessarily a national power, although they had some success beforehand in the 70s and 60s, but it took a while to build, or that UCLA, under Wooden really built up, but it took them a minute, or that KU up until 88 had some great history with Will Chamberlain, but that's really where it turned around with Roy and Bill Self and Larry Brown winning that title, and that's where Baylor wants to be. And as Ric Flair says, you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And so, it's cool to beat St. Mary's, it's cool to beat Indiana, you beat the guys in front of you, but it would be kind of cool to say North Carolina, get out of town, UCLA, LA's cool, but you're not that good compared to what you should have been. I think they are good, but you can say that. And then tell Kentucky, Oscar Tshiebwe's pretty nice, but we got James Akenjo, and we prefer him at the point to Ty Washington. Now Baylor will have to prove that on the court, but a lot of smack you can talk if Baylor goes through that region.
Kendall, they've obviously already had a pretty successful year. I mean, a share of the Big 12 regular season, won a bunch of games, and did it all through a lot of adversity. In terms of the tournament, what do you see as kind of like the baseline to consider the postseason a success as well?
It's a great question, Craig, and I think this is the ultimate, kind of how do you feel? I wouldn't blame anybody if they said, you know what, it's hard to be a one seed. Not often do you have two freshmen who could be lottery picks, senior and Matt Meyer, who was thought of as a possible first-round pick coming in, first-team All-Big 12 player, and James Akenjo. And by the way, I think Adam Flagler is a better college player than all of them. You have a roster like that, even with the injuries, you can make the case that, well, if you don't make the Elite Eight, it's kind of a disappointing season. I don't view it that way. I think winning the Big 12, doing what you did, it will always be thought of pretty fondly. But you don't get a lot of opportunities where everything still comes together, even with the injuries. So I think it will be viewed kind of disappointingly if they lose that second game. It'll happen. KU's had it happen a lot of times. North Carolina's had it happen to them. It happens when you get to a stage like this where you just can't avoid losses like that. But I think if they have that second round loss, it'll always be more of a what-if season. I think if they lose a tough game to UCLA or Kentucky, it'll be okay, we lost to a good team on a good day with injuries. And if you make the Final Four, it's not going to be viewed as last season because winning the title, that's special, the first title for Baylor. But I think Final Four is really the, oh my God, what a fantastic season. You can argue this is a better coaching job than last year with the injuries. But I think that second weekend is what you got to get to feel like there isn't some what did we leave behind kind of feeling. That's tough, but that's the nature of the tournament. KU's had a lot of seasons like that. Baylor doesn't want to have one like that with the crew they have this year.
By the way, Kendall, in some of the chat room and also the text line, people who enjoy your articles, but what they also love is how you insert video below whatever points or whatever you're writing about, which is I see that more and more. I've seen a couple like C.J. Moore, The Athletic. I've seen him do that as well. Is that easy to do? I'm sure it is with technology, which, of course, is out of my range.
It's not too tough to just gather the videos. What's a lot easier now is they're shouting the flight info above, so hopefully that audio is not too bad for y'all. But what's not too tough now is a lot of people just upload the games to YouTube. College basketball is cool because they don't take the content down like Major League Baseball does. So really easy to get them. And then it just takes a little bit to figure out the interface. But no, that's not too challenging. From the outside to me, I'm sure for, you Smokey and you, Craig, and when Paul's around, it's probably really easy for y'all to gather audio and for Armstrong to gather audio. But for me, if I sat behind the desk for a day, I'd be like, oh my God, how do we play this down? How do we make sure the interview's here? So I got the wrong guy on hold. So I think it's one of those deals that once you can do it, it feels pretty easy to do. But before you can do it, it's like, oh my God, how do you get into this or know what to do?
Kendall, as far as the rest of the Big 12 goes, I mean, obviously a pretty solid field numbers-wise, but is there a certain team, the way they're playing right now, or perhaps the path that they have that you have going pretty deep?
So I have KU going pretty far, Greg. I think Remy Martin coming back shows that KU can hit their ceiling, which preseason I think was legitimately a top 5 team. And as much as I hate on Texas all the time, and I hate to say it, I'm kind of talking myself into Texas can make the second weekend. Purdue's looked a little shaky down the stretch. Texas has an athleticism that you don't often see in the Big Ten. Jaden Ivey's a good player, but with how that staff can kind of scout things out with how good that staff is with Chris Beard and company. And then Texas's defense is pretty unique for Purdue to face. I'm kind of talking myself into Texas, but maybe that's just I've hated on them so much over the last 2 years that I no longer have the same hate I once did. So I don't know, but I'm kind of looking at Texas as a sleeper team if I were in my bracket to say Purdue might be a little overvalued, but now watch Purdue win the title. But I think Texas is that team that's undervalued relative to bracket expectations.
Thank you, Kendall. Be careful on the flight. We'll see you tomorrow in Fort Worth. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it, fellas. Thanks.
Kendall Kaut, Sic'Em365.com basketball writer and also an analyst on this show as well. And again, it's all things that like the younger generation, and not just younger generation, that reading an article, a regular column or an article, and then right below a certain point about who is doing this or what player does this or what they're not doing well, and then there's a video clip that kind of explains it with arrows and all that. That's so above my mental ability about technology, but I love it. I absolutely love it. It allows me to read the article and understand it better. And I know that C.J. Moore, The Athletic, has done that. I know others have, but Kendall has done that as well. When we come back, 5:40, we'll update you on a couple